My name is Ryan Perkins, and I'm a second-year MBA at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce our next presentation, Tour Analytics, Making Professional Golf More Data-Driven. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Charlie DiStefano, data scientist with Callaway Golf, to the stage.
All right, good morning. Thank you all for being here. As Ryan said, my name is Charlie DiStefano, data scientist at Callaway Golf, and I'm very excited to get to talk to you guys today about my work on Tour Analytics. So, quick agenda. I'm going to just start with a few overview slides, then going to dive into a handful of different case studies, and then we'll leave time at the end for some Q&A. So I want to start with a quote by Marcus Aurelius that says, "The secret to victory lies in the organization of the non-obvious." This really speaks to what I try to do with Tour Analytics, which is to organize and analyze millions of different shots in order to extract out those non-obvious insights. To do this, really focus on three main objectives. One, to provide performance insights to players, coaches, performance reps. Two, to provide strategy insights to caddies. And then three, provide equipment usage and performance insights back to our R&D teams. So the types of data I deal with, everything really starts with the XYZ shot coordinates. This is what we get from PGA ShotLink, where they measure the starting and ending location of every shot that's taken at a tournament. From here, it really allows us to build everything up from the ground level. So we can structure the data how we feel, we can create any metrics that we might come up with, and then we can start layering on different detail elements, things like launch conditions. So what are the ball speeds, launch angles, backspins of different shots. Can look at equipment details, so what clubs are being used, what are the weight settings, things like that. Course descriptions, so what are the grass types we're playing on, what are the green speeds, what are the rough heights. Player info, how long have you been on tour, what's your rank, how many wins have you racked up. And we can also add in weather info. So we take all this data, and then we can start building our metrics. Again, these are put into three main categories. First, player performance. These are the types of metrics that you might find on the PGA website. Things like strokes gained, greens in regulation, made putt percentage, etc. And then we'll layer on those details that really let us slice and filter the data. So might want to look at how a player performs with Club A versus Club B, or how they perform at different shot distances, or on different putt breaks, or out of different lies into different pin locations. Anything that really adds that extra layer of detail gives us the ability to add context to our shots. I want to expand a little bit on strokes gained. For anyone who's unfamiliar with that, that is one of the main metrics that we use in golf today. It is basically a measure of what we would expect an average tour player to perform on a given shot, and then we use that as a baseline to compare your performance against. So any positive value means you're better than average, any negative value, you're worse than average. This really lets us identify which elements of your game are contributing most to your score. It's a direct correlation with your actual score. So for example, if you beat the field average by one stroke, we can look at strokes gained to say, well, maybe a quarter of that was due to your putting performance. Maybe a quarter of it was due to your driving performance, and then the remaining half can be attributed to your approach performance. Next, looking at course insights, these are things like historical trends, scoring averages from around the course, looking at different holes, different pin locations. For one pin location, maybe you can be really aggressive towards it. Another pin location, you need to be more conservative. Anything that really helps players understand the best way to go about approaching a hole. Lastly is the equipment usage. So this is things like conversion, who's playing our product, retention. Once we have someone in our product, how likely is it that they're going to continue playing our product? Market share, what is our footprint on the tour relative to our competitors? And then performance, how is our product this year comparing with our product last year? Or how does our product compare with competitors' product? Now getting into the fun stuff, this is case studies. These are more of the day-to-day, week-to-week types of questions that I might get from a player or a coach or a caddy. this is where we do the deep dives into the data to try and find those actionable insights that we can deliver. Actionable being the key word here, because these players are traveling all over the country, all over the world, playing different courses that all require different skill sets, have different demands, different things that you need to focus on week in and week out. And so this is where we come in, providing focus, practice recommendations, and any necessary product adjustments that they might need. So the first case study, doing an equipment evaluation, imagine a player comes in saying they're really struggling with their driver, they keep missing it to the right, and they want a new one. So first step is to dive into the data, make sure that they are in fact struggling and that they're not just imagining things. So here we can see that first, right now, he at the time was averaging 0.37 strokes per round, so above average, but we do see a significant right miss bias. 61% of the time his misses are going to the right, so his assumption was correct. On the bottom, we have all of his launch conditions. So we can kind of use these as a baseline. As we make adjustments, we can make sure that the adjustments we're making are having the impact that we desire. So for this, with the fact that he's missing to the right, we'd recommend adjusting the face angle to have a more leftward start, as well as shifting any weight to the heel side in order to help reduce some of that side spin. So give him the new driver, let him play it for a couple events, get a nice sample size, come back, check in. So now with a new driver, we can see that he's averaging 0.63 strokes per round, so he's gained a quarter of a stroke. Tournaments are 4 rounds, so we'd expect with this new driver that he'll average 1 stroke better. We can see that the miss tendency has now been balanced, 50-50, and then the 2 main metrics that I mentioned, the spin and the face angle I've got highlighted, where we can see that the spin did in fact drop, and the side angle is more negative, meaning it has more of a leftward start. So now we have these numbers as his new baseline, so we can use these moving forward. If he starts to struggle at some point, we can always look back, say, okay, you were playing well at this time, try and get your numbers back to this state. Second case study, this is more player evaluation. So this is more of those practice recommendations. So you can imagine a player comes in, he's playing great tee to green, so his driving is going well, his approach is going well, he's just really struggling putting. So the coach might come to us and say, hey, what are the top 2 things that we should work on in order to really focus this week, have the biggest impact, really get the biggest bang for our buck? So right here we've got it broken out by distance. That's where I'll start. You can see the red is the things he's below average. The green is what he's above average. You can see this big third bar, which is the 5 to 10 foot range. That's his biggest weakness, so that's a good place to start. So we can drill into that, and right here I'll look at how he's missing. So it's a mistype distribution. We've got it defined as the high side, low side, short, and long misses, where a high side and low side is dependent on the break. So if it's a right to left breaking putt, high side's going to be on the right. If it's a left to right breaking putt, high side's going to be on the left, and vice versa for the low side. So we can see that there's a significant imbalance between the high side and the low side, about a 2-to-1 ratio where he's missing on the low side. This can be due to misreads, but more often than not, it'll be due to underhitting it, in which case the break will end up playing a larger impact. And we can also see that 10% of the time he's missing short. So 10% of the time he's not even getting it to the hole. So we have a significant number of putts where he's underhitting it. But then we also see a 14% long miss distribution, which is relative to a 5% tour average from this distance. So this is clearly someone who's struggling with their speed control, right? He's underhitting it, probably getting frustrated, saying, okay, I'm just going to hit this one hard, and then ends up hitting it too hard, going past. So for this first recommendation, we would say, okay, 5 to 10 feet with a heavy emphasis on your speed control. Now the second recommendation is a little trickier because nothing else really jumps off the page. On this high level, we might say the 15 to 20 is the next most negative number, so we can start there. This time we'll look at performance by break. So we've got downhill left to right, downhill right to left, uphill left to right, uphill right to left. We can see that, yes, he has a slight positive on the uphill left to right, but everything else is pretty equally negative. Nothing really jumps out, and I don't want to go to them and just say, hey, work on your 15 to 20 foot putts. That's not really specific enough for what we're trying to get at, so we can keep looking. Next, I look at 10 to 15. Here we see something interesting where there's a clear divide between the performance on uphill putts versus downhill putts. In fact, he's gaining about 0.12 on the uphill putts, losing 0.2 on the downhill putts. So while his uphill putts are actually one of his largest strengths, one of his biggest weaknesses is the downhill putts. So we bring this to their attention, and then this would be our second recommendation. So the top two things we would recommend, again, would be the 5 to 10 foot with an emphasis on speed control, and then the 10 to 15 foot with an emphasis on downhill putts. These two specific putt types would account for over 0.6 strokes per round, which, over the course of a tournament, that's 2 strokes that they could be picking up with just performing these 2 specific putts at a tour average level. Third case study is looking at course insights. Obviously, a course insight can be useful for anyone, but it's really impactful for people who haven't played a course before. It could be a rookie, it could be someone coming over from another tour, but if they've never played a course before, they're at a significant disadvantage to anyone who has. So they might come to us and say, hey, at this course, what are the holes that we really need to focus on? What are the skills that we really need to focus on? So to do this, on the left side, we have hole importance. On the right, we have skill importance. This is dictated by what do people in the top 10 do especially well? Where do they separate themselves from the field? So on the hole importance, on the left, we can see that for this course, hole 15 would be designated as the most important hole. This doesn't mean it's the easiest hole. It doesn't mean it's the hardest hole. It's just a hole where people who do well and finish in the top 10 really separate themselves from everyone else. So if you want to keep up with the people at the top of the leaderboard, you're going to need to follow a similar recipe. On the skill side, on the right, we can see that for this tournament, the most impactful skills are tee shot with driver, 5 to 10 foot putts, 10 to 30 yard chip shots, 140 to 160 yard approaches. So these are things that they could go and spend a little extra time working on the range, but they might say, okay, well, you say 10 to 30 yards is a important skill. When might that come up? What are the holes that shot will actually show up on? So we can select it, update the hole importance. Now we can see that for this skill specifically, hole 10 is the most important hole. So this might be, during their practice round, say, hey, just drop a few extra balls around the green, take a couple extra shots, because in the event you miss this green during a round, it's going to be a very important up and down in order for you to keep pace with the leaders. On the flip side, if we want to look at the hole importance again, they say, okay, you said hole 15 was the most important. What is it about that hole that makes it important? What are the areas that we need to avoid? What do we need to target? So we can select it, pull up course maps. We have maps for the entire course. Right here, I've just highlighted the green complex. So on the left, we have the elevation topology. So we can see the high points in the green, low points, slopes, things of that nature. And then we have the 4 pin locations that we expect to see over the 4 rounds. The numbers around the green are the up and down percentages, and then the individual dots are historical putt locations and their corresponding scoring averages from those regions. You can obviously see how the scoring averages and the up and down percentages change pretty drastically from pin location to pin location, but this also helps pull out some of those non-obvious insights. An obvious statement might be, hitting the green is always better than missing the green. That seems like something most people agree with, but in reality, it's not always the case. The back right pin location, the second from the right, you can see that if you actually go long in the little fairway relief area, it's a 97% chance of up and down. So a very easy chip. Even if you miss in the rough, it's still a 90%. So it's almost automatic when you miss long. Whereas if you look at the front side of the green, Those dots are dark red, which if you look at the color bar, that corresponds to a 2.4 scoring average, which is the equivalent of about a 60% up and down. So what this is telling us is that missing long actually gives you a 30% more likelihood of getting up and down than if you hit the green on the front edge. This is obviously due to the elevation change. It's a very difficult putt from that lower tier. But this might be one of those holes where we say the strategy is be very aggressive, green light, try and attack the pin. If you hit and bounce over, not a big deal. You're still going to have an easy up and down. Whereas if you hit the front side of the green or miss left, you're going to have a very difficult time getting up and down. In conclusion, professional golfers, as I said, they travel all over the world, playing in different tournaments, different courses, have different demands week in, week out. They really don't have a lot of time to dig into their data themselves. They might show up on a Monday, they have a little bit of time to practice, have a practice round on Tuesday, typically maybe a pro-am on Wednesday, and then the tournament goes Thursday to Sunday, and then jump on a plane, move to the next location. So that's where we come in. We do the deep dives for them, kind of highlight these in-depth, non-obvious player, course, and equipment insights to help them with their preparation. Compared to other sports, really, I think it's fair to say that golf has been pretty slow to embrace utilizing data for performance evaluation, but we hope that Tour Analytics is a step towards changing that. So with that, I can open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Hi, Sam Hennock, Nike Sports Marketing Analytics. Question for you is, do you see, or is there anything obvious about the struggle that a college golfer has in transitioning to professional in terms of their performance? So, I guess more succinctly, what are the biggest problems that a college golfer has in upping their game to a professional level right after that transition?
Great question. That's tough to answer. I think a lot of it is probably the course insights, as I mentioned, when they're playing against guys who have played, several times at courses. They might have experienced these difficulties for different pin locations firsthand. They know kind of the strategy. They know, okay, this hole I play better when I lay up. This hole I can be more aggressive. College players really have none of that information, as well as a lot of the equipment preparation. I'm not fully apprised to what types of equipment alterations they have the access to at the college level always. Obviously, some of the bigger programs might have more access, but being able to really get their product dialed in, knowing what their shot types are that they really need to emphasize. And then, again, I think the main point would be the course insights of knowing how to prepare week in, week out, knowing that you can't just do the same thing every week, and really being able to dive into what separates the people who finish in the top 10 on the PGA Tour with just the average player.
So super cool stuff, by the way. Question for you, like everything I think you showed was largely about outcomes, right? Like it's based on decisions the golfer made. How do you measure the quality of those decisions and their intent and what they intended to do, say on a tee shot, to drive it out left or right of their intended point, if that makes sense? Strokes gained does a good job of that, of really, figuring out versus a baseline. We can adjust the baseline to tour average. We can have a personal baseline to look at, your own historical performance, how you compared in similar shots to that, to know kind of, certain people might always hover around average, so comparing them against tour average isn't really useful. But if you can compare it against your own personal percentile, maybe that is your 20th percentile of a shot, or maybe it's your 80th percentile. So maybe on the holistic scale of comparing it to everybody might be difficult, but we can compare it against their own historical performance to maybe
garners a little extra insight would be one way to do it.
Hi, I'm curious how you've seen golf analytics change as players have become, more athletic and more like for example, Bryson DeChambeau, like bulking up, stuff like that. I'm curious if you've seen any effect.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a slow build. I think this year we've definitely seen a little bit more of a tipping point for people being more open to it. What the reason is behind that, I'm not sure, but I think it's maybe just, building the trust with the people that we show them things, and at first maybe they're hesitant to really alter the way they're preparing based on it, but as they start to see the impact and see the success that they get from using analytics, I think it's just going to continue to grow. But as I said, I think compared to other sports, it's definitely been a little bit behind the eight ball.
So I'm curious, in other sports I've often heard, I'm a golfer first, and that's what I played, but I've heard people say here that other sports, you often deliver the insights from analytics to coaches. You talked about caddies and players, but I'm curious how many players and what's the variation in players being receptive to the insights versus delivering it to the coaches and the coaches developing, changing practice habits, and then delivering those to the players instead of delivering the raw analytics?
Yeah, great question. That is one of the hurdles. A lot of players don't want to hear analytics at all. They let everything kind of go through their team. Certain players, particularly some of the younger ones, might be a little more receptive to hearing it directly. Some of the more established people, they're the ones that just let their caddies and their coaches kind of disseminate the information to them. So more often than not, we are dealing with the caddies and the coaches as opposed to the players directly, but it really is just a case-by-case basis, and some guys are more receptive to it than others.
Hey Charlie, thank you for the talk. This was super interesting. I was wondering, what's kind of the split between delivering like proactive insights versus like reactive insights? You talked about, a player comes to you like, I'm missing my drive right, and that's like something that you're going back to solve for. But is there like packages of reporting that you guys are pushing out to your players every week, or your coaches or their team? Kind of how is that?
Yeah, so the course reports will be things that go out week to week. The practice recommendations and the trend reports, those are more of a by request type things, where, maybe every quarter, or, we just finished the West Coast swing. Now all the tournaments are heading to Florida. This is a good time to kind of reevaluate what this first chapter of the season, what they did well, what they struggled with. So those kind of trend reports are a little bit more intermittent, but the course reports and the strategy, those will go out every week.
Great stuff. Thanks for going over this. Super interesting. I wanted to ask about data capture in particular. So you mentioned shot length, but some of the data that you were showing had, say, left to right putts, uphill, downhill. You may be able to sort of get at those through the XYZ coordinates, but I'm wondering, is there a separate piece where you're working with either the caddies or the players to hydrate that data and fill it with additional metadata?
So with the putts, we can calculate all that from the XYZ. We use more of the caddies and the players as kind of a validation, almost like they can come to us and say they feel like something was captured incorrectly, and then we can go in and dive and see what looks like. I mean, certain of the mistypes, we have the starting location, the ending location, we know the slopes, so we can calculate expected trajectories. We can't capture things like lip outs. If it lips out and it spins off to the side, we don't know that that's what happened. So there's certain elements like that just we're not going to be able to capture. But for the most part, we can calculate most things from the XYZ coordinates, and then we use the caddies and the players kind of just to confirm what we're seeing.
Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have. If you have more questions for Charlie, he'll be available out in the lobby. Thank you so much.
Thank you.